I think we're live. It's just thinking about it. Okay. A lot of people online probably. Has been for a little while. We're live for 5 seconds. There we go.
Oh, cool.
Hello, welcome. My name's Matt Bailey, National Ambassador. I'm sitting here with Andrew Derbidge, our Cellar Master, New South Wales State Manager, Director, all-round whiskey geek. What else can I... You didn't turn your sound down,
I bloody did.
I told you to turn your sound down.
Bloody did.
Welcome. I hope hope people are tuning in now. We've just gone live. I know it takes a moment sometimes for this to pick up, and I'm sure some comments will come in shortly because there's quite a few people anticipating this, which is great. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to you.
I wanted to make sure that everyone can hear us as well. I think it's all hunky-dory here. I think we've all got the right sound and the right setup here. So I'm going to take these off. It's just a test. And we can just talk without needing headphones.
Okay, a couple of thumbs up here from David and Robert, so we'll assume that they're hearing us mostly.
I can't get a stream on this, so I can't get the comments on here, so I'm going to go with Andrew's. Andrew, you're in charge of the comments.
I'm on tonight.
Yeah, you're on screen.
Okay.
But, it's really great to be here, and I just wanted to have a chance for us to do a live with Andrew because it's not often that he and I get to catch up in a professional context. Or even a social context at the moment.
It's hard.
It's COVID. It's COVID time. So
you can't see it, by the way, but there's actually a piece of glass separating the two of us.
Let me just grab that water jug.
Thank you. Yeah,
yep.
Well done.
So no, there's we're keeping a bit of distance. I mean, this is 1.5 meters. Surely, I don't know who's measuring, but it's all about a little bit of distance, but just keeping everything nice and hunky dory there.
Frankly, it's just nice to get out of the cellar.
Yeah. I want to know, does anyone here think that Andrew sits all day in a cellar? I'd love that. I'd love for that to be an actual thing. I'm imagining like an old brick train tunnel.
Oh, that's it.
Just filled with whiskey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And your job is to pick them up and admire them.
Well, twice a day.
And rotate.
Yes, that's right.
I wanted to have a chat with Andrew tonight about everything when it comes to his role, his journey in whiskey, and for us to share a dram. It's really informal tonight. I can tell you how many minutes on one hand we've gone into planning tonight's session. Are you ready? There it is.
Yes,
okay, excellent. Yeah, so that's the number of minutes we've been preparing for tonight. It's a chance for us to catch up, to talk about all the things I just mentioned. And we've actually got not one but two April outturn previews. And April outturn will arrive in your inboxes tomorrow. It'd normally be Friday, but we're sending it out just a day before the week before. So outturn is, of course, falling on the normal Friday, the 3rd of April. As I've had a few members ask for some reason, it is still the first Friday of every month, with the exception of January this year, which the first Friday was like the 1st or the 2nd, so we just pushed it back a week. And our Christmas issue, which is a November-December double issue, which is launched in the middle of November. All things going to plan and the world still existing by then, we'll all still be going by that plan. But it's Friday the 3rd of April. For our outturn, and we've got two casks from that outturn to preview for you tonight. There it is. Look, actually just arrived for us today. So there's a copy of outturn. It's going to arrive in your inboxes tomorrow. It even shows it around the right way on that.
Well, that's a nice change.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this is the 4th outturn for the year. Really exciting. It's got a big slobbering dog on the cover, which Susie, our general manager, who is a huge dog lover, so that's she quite liked that cover. And we're always open. While our events and everything at the moment might be on a bit of a hiatus, our online events aren't. The Gathering Pack is still going live on the 20th of April. You can grab your pack now. It'll be sent out in time. Hold that one up right there. You can see it. And we've also got our, of course, our web store is always open, and our Australia Post is still delivering. So that's all that matters.
That's a good drop, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's a dram drop.
I thought it was a mic drop adapted.
Yeah, no, well done.
Yeah, thanks. So let me ask you. I want to know, first of all, what does it mean to be cellar master for you, and have you seen the whiskey scene change in your role in society? That's sort of two questions, but
well, it is, yeah. Look, I was contemplating this a couple of days ago. The society is just a microcosm of the whiskey industry in general, which has seen tremendous change in the last 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. How far do you keep going back? How we're doing things now is so different to how we were doing things 2 years ago. And when I say doing things, what does that mean? Our tastings, our events. We're doing a live stream.
Yeah.
We weren't doing that. Ways that we used to promote and sell bottles to members has changed. How we interact with members has changed. 15, 20 years ago, certainly when I started with the society, it was still a very unknown category, the spirit of cask strength whiskey. When you describe someone as trying to explain to someone cask whiskey, back then people thought of cask wine. The whiskey came in a goon bag. That was a big misconception. Our events, the big thing really is consumer knowledge. I think 20 years ago there was still a huge degree of education that was needed, and I think now a lot of people who come into whiskey actually have that level to start with, A level, certainly more than there was previously. So we can spend more time talking about what's in the glass and enjoying it rather than having to educate about how it got in the glass in the first place.
Would you say that the starting education level has even changed in the last 2 to 5 years?
Incredibly so. But look at the resources you've got to educate yourself now. When I started getting into whiskey, you had to buy a book, and that was the only thing.
Yeah, sure.
Now there's unbelievable resources online. There's websites that will tell you this and that. There's YouTube videos if you prefer to watch rather than read. There's other clubs and online groups that simply have discussions, and you pick up knowledge just through involvement and osmosis.
Yeah.
Very, very different scene in so many ways.
Yeah, it has. It's even. I mean, I haven't been in it as long as Andrew has, but I've certainly seen it change quite a bit in the last 5 years for myself. Last 7 or 8 years as well. I mean, it's certainly evolved a lot, and I think a lot of that comes down to in a discussion I had recently with our state manager Alex. He was saying that even more and more so, it's the advent of groups like this one that you're in right now, where discussion can flourish and can sort of happen quite quickly. Which has changed. I mean, you remember whiskey forums, of course.
Yes.
And so do I. I mean, I remember whiskey forums. That's certainly changed in that time, and I think that's mostly for a positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was trying to think about this. If you've come into whiskey in the last 5 years, and I don't know how many viewers that applies to, but if you've just really seriously got into whiskey into 5 years, you've come into a scene where all you know is the fact that there's whiskey bars everywhere. Now, that wasn't the case when I got into whiskey. There was one whiskey bar in Sydney, and it wasn't even a bloody whiskey bar. Now you've got a choice to go through. Go back far enough, there wasn't the whiskey and ailments that we have in Melbourne and the like.
No.
If you've come into that scene in the last 5 years, you've come into a scene where there are online groups.
Yeah.
Facebook groups, for example.
Yeah.
The Society's Facebook group that you're tuned into watching right now. If you came in the last 5 years, you've always just understood and I guess taken for granted that Japanese whiskey is rare and expensive. It wasn't that way.
No.
15 years ago, we'd go to whiskey tastings and someone would bring out the Yamazaki 12-year-old that they dropped $70 on, and we'd all look down on it strangely.
Honestly. Yeah. Look down on it strangely. I love that line.
What I laugh at is, for all the reasons we know now, some Japanese whiskies, some rare casks and bottlings won some big awards, which generated interest in the category. Everyone went out and got excited about it, started buying it. The Japanese didn't foresee that coming, and they didn't ramp up their production in time. And we now have a massive shortfall in that category. So as such, bottlings of the Yamazaki 12-year-old are now really hard to come by, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
The juice didn't get any better. They didn't change their recipe. It's not actually different distillate in the bottle compared to what it used to be. No. And yet suddenly people will happily, climb over one another and drop $300 to get a bottle when it's really the same thing. Yeah, more. It's the same thing. So that's something that's changed as well. If you came in the last 5 years,
yeah.
If you came to the scene recently, you'd have an awareness of Australian whiskey. There are a lot of whiskey brands out there now. That wasn't the case in the past.
No.
Go back 10, 15 years ago, 15 years certainly, there were only 2 or 3 brands that were worth chatting about who had a profile.
Yeah.
So from a consumer point of view, just tremendous. You don't have to have grey hair or been drinking for a long time. These changes we're talking about have been as recently as the last 5 years.
But it does help.
It does help, but then,
I meant the grey hair.
Well, but again, how far back to go?
Yeah.
I started drinking whiskey in seriously, yeah, okay, no, in 91, 92, and I started seriously getting into it in 95. That shapes my perception of the whole thing. Talk to someone who was drinking it 10, 20 years before me.
Yeah.
Totally different view on it as well. So how you approach the industry and your attitude towards it is very much a function of what the scene was like when you first got into it. And that's been a rapidly changing and developing field.
Yeah, it has, and it's those changes are, I think, like I said, I love the fact that they're all very positive, and people are discussing this more and more and learning more about it. And even at the tastings that I get to host, I just see that the knowledge level in the room is, even 5 years ago, I remember the times where I'd be talking about a single cask, and I'd be talking about something to do with that particular distillery, and I'd hear a question like, what's the difference between this and a blended whiskey? I'd say, well, okay, I've obviously jumped too far ahead too quickly here.
Yeah.
Let's rewind a bit, and I have to sort of readjust where my position was in the event. But that doesn't happen. It happens less and less anyway.
I think a great insight is, and you know this, if we're doing a conventional masterclass tasting, traditional style tasting for the society, and you've got 80 people in the audience, which is typical for a Sydney crowd.
Yep.
10, 15 years ago, when I started, or 15 years ago, when I started doing as New South Wales manager, you had 80 people who would sit there quietly and hang off every word you said and listen to you. Now,
there's no easy way to say that.
Now they're less interested in listening because they already have that level of assumed knowledge, and it's more about sharing and experiencing thoughts on the drink. And it's this a social thing. So it's the very dynamic of the tasting has changed. We don't call them tastings anymore. Now they're meetings.
Yeah, meetings. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Let's have a dram.
What do you want to kick off with? We've got two over here. Have a shot. I'm thinking that one.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Yeah. Spicy and dry. Now, this is an outturn preview. Andrew, why don't you tell us what it says?
This particular expression?
Yeah, what's it called?
We are drinking, or about to crack, cask 55.57.
Digging up ginger.
How
cool is that?
It's a 10-year-old, and it was distilled in September 2008, and spent its time in a refilled ex-bourbon hogshead. And we'll just listen for the sound up to the microphone.
How good was that? That had good sound.
Now, you know me, mate. I'm a big believer that you never pour another man's dream. So I'm going to... Sorry, some habits just... So spicy and dry, a flavour profile we don't see too often. Not often you see the gold band around the neck there. Sort
of like goldish, yellowish kind of band.
Yep.
It's a bit of it's one of those flavor profiles we don't see too many of, just as we don't see too many light and delicates either, the really light blue strip. And we don't see an awful, we don't see heaps of old and dignified, because obviously old whiskey is harder and harder to come by.
Yeah, it's spicy and dry straight off the nose.
Yeah, it is.
That is incredible. I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I smell that and it just reminds me of Old Spice.
Old Spice?
Old Spice.
Yeah, right.
The men's deodorant. Not really old ground up cinnamon sitting in a corner.
No. The men's cologne.
And remember the really daggy ad with the sailing ship?
I'm on a horse. Remember that? I'm on a horse?
Ah, yes.
Yeah. I remember reading about that campaign. They spent millions and millions of dollars on it, and it didn't sell an extra bottle of Old Spice.
Wow, that is dry.
It's dry
on the nose. Now, this is a distillery that's actually famed for its very fruity new make, and they go a long way with a long fermentation, and they run their stills in such a way, and the stills are shaped in such a way, in fact, that really generates the collection of esters. They generate esters in their fermentation, and they come through in the distillate. So it's traditionally a very fruity, dare I say, sweet new make spirit, and this cask is... which is just a refill bourbon hogshead, by the way, but it's certainly shaped it in a direction that's taken it quite dry.
I get like a cloudy apple juice note.
Yeah, good
like
call.
That, that like almost fermenty kind of apple juice note.
Absolutely, good call.
And these kind of whiskies, these kind of spicy and dry whiskies out of like a refill hogshead, 10-year-old out of a refill hogshead in spicy and dry. I've talked a little bit about this before, once or twice on Instagram, about how there's a certain like savory industrial note to the nose in some of them. Like not every whiskey has to be sweet, like the whole sort of sweet and peat kind of approach. Some whiskeys can have a really sort of lovely, almost like farmyardy industrial, not quite industrial, but farmyard funk kind of going on in some of them, which is like quite a savory note, which I love in a whiskey, like that oat cakes and apple juice kind of thing going on the nose of this.
Have you tasted this yet?
Not yet, but by the tone on your voice, I don't know.
I got one word for you, and I'm not ashamed to use this word: delicious. That is stunningly gorgeous.
That's remarkable.
Isn't it just?
How's the mouthfeel on that? It's far oilier than I was expecting.
Wow.
Toohee's extra dry. Look out.
Now here's an interesting point, and it doesn't say it on the bottle, and I'm now actually racking my brain. I tell a lie, it does say it on the bottle. This is a Speyside distillery, which I would have questioned immediately because it's actually right up in the top left, getting very close towards Inverness.
I was about to say, I thought it was a Highland distillery.
Yeah, well, that would have been my first guess with the label. It says Speyside, so it must be right. We've never had a misprint on a label before, have we?
We put the word Highland on the 123s.
Yes. Yeah. Well, officially that's
correct. Yes, I guess, yeah.
We've got some comments that have been coming in here.
George says, I remember, yes. Benoit, good to see you. Rory, did it drop out? No, I don't think it did. We're still live. If it drops out, just
wave and do something.
Yeah, close it and start it open again. Seriously underrated profile, Keenan says.
Yeah,
the ones I've tried have all been quality.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to go back to Christmas Outturn and the Gathering series from last year. There was a 70 dot something, and it was a spicy and dry from Distillery 70. That was my favorite of last year.
This particular distillery, right up in the top left-hand corner of Speyside, right on the limit of what I think we would accept as Speyside. Very first distillery to ever receive a royal warrant.
All right, there you go.
King William.
Yes.
Is it William IV? I'm trying to. Must have been.
I won't be able to get that one off the top of my head.
Kings and Queens of England. We all know them, don't
we? Yeah.
And these days, it's owned by the good folks at Bacardi. And if you come down Bacardi's line, they own the Dewars Group. Dewars, of course, being a blend, a well-known blend. And they have 4 or 5 distilleries. And when you go to this distillery, and I went there for the first time 3 years ago, it has a lot in common with the other distilleries of that group. So another distillery in the group is Craigellachie. If you look at the Craigellachie Stillhouse and you look at this Stillhouse, very, very similar. Altmore as well. Share that same architecture. They all got modernised and rebuilt in the 1960s, obviously engaged the same architect and the same contractors, so they have that in common. So even though the distilleries date back to the 19th century and they were all built in the 1800s, the Stillhouse in particular for almost all of the distilleries in that group all got redone in the 1960s with certain style. 2 exceptions there. One is Aberfeldy, which has still got its glorious Victorian.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. I've not been down to Feldy. That's cool. Yeah.
Smack in the middle of Perthshire, in the middle, not far from Pitlochry. You don't have to go too far north for that one. And then the other one is Glendevron, or Macduff, as it's sometimes known. That is also a 1960s monstrosity, but a very different architect, so different shape.
The Sixers, Society 6 dot.
Yes.
Macduff, I do love them. But
Graham's asking for the bottle code. He may have just missed that. It's 55.57. Appearing on April's Outturn, which you'll be receiving.
Which is going out tomorrow. In terms of you'll get the digital copies tomorrow. Those who still got mailed copies will get this as well.
Thank you, Morsey, just for confirming it was William IV.
Yes, nicely done, Morsey.
The only reason I know that was because he was a sailor. He wasn't expecting to be king, and we'll bore you with that some other time. That has nothing to do with whiskey, but anyway.
No, I like those kind of stories, though. Yeah.
We all wear different nerd hats occasionally.
Indeed, yeah. Andrew referenced Craigellachie just before. For those who caught the live stream the other night, 44.116 Malt of the month. I don't know if that's the same distillery. I couldn't possibly tell you. But just Distillery 44, Cask 116, Malt of the Month is only 149. Isn't that ridiculous?
Just prompting. Do you mind if we take the conversation back?
No, go for it.
5-10 minutes. We were just talking earlier about how the industry has changed and how whiskey has changed and how member experiences have changed. And it's probably just worth to think again, and I'll frame it in this: if you've just come into whiskey in the last 5, 6, 7, or 8 years, the scene that you've come into. And a big thing to think about, of course, is the number of distilleries that now actually have official bottlings that we can try.
Yeah.
Craig Gillicky was very hard to come by.
It was.
There are now official bottlings around.
There was a 14 that bounced around a bit, but never it was impossible to find.
Yeah. This is another good example now. Under Bacardi's current ownership, they've now released official bottlings of that, which you can get at local stores here in Australia. But another great example there. And I think there's some really obscure, strange distilleries that really exist purely for blending, but so that they don't miss the boat, they are putting out official bottlings that we can get now. Alphavania is a good example of that.
That's also quite recent.
Very recent. Yeah. That was started last year from memory.
Yeah, it's
2019.
It's a no-age statement peated Altavan.
Correct.
Yeah.
And other examples too. So I think it's just fascinating that distilleries that were once upon a time were absolute mysteries and that you would only encounter through independent bottlings, like through the society, are now around. So again, fascinating. And again, what's interesting now is once upon a time you'd get a bottle like this from the society, and it was the only way you'd ever get to taste something from that distillery, and so you'd sort of hang your hat on that. Now, of course, that you can get expressions at your local bottle shop, it broadens your horizons even more, because you can now actually compare this to what they want the house style to be.
Yeah.
And it suddenly puts society bottlings in a whole new light. And let's not lose sight of the fact that's what the society was all about in the first place. The very reason it came into existence was because they realised or capitalised on the fact that cask whiskey in a single cask could taste very different to the commercially available expression. That, for me, is still a hallmark of society membership and why I love still being involved. Because distillery, and some smart ass made a comment with this earlier about the dreaded Glen bagpipes has been mentioned. But if you know what Glen bagpipes taste like from your local bottle shop, you can get a society Glen bagpipe and compare the difference. And that, for me, is the real joy of single cask discovery, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Zeno's asked if we can have a new paper label rant. I think we've pretty much covered that. Andrew made a comment in his live stream a week or more ago about how I call them paper labels only because they were succeeded by the.
It's paper. It's
No. It was because they were succeeded by the plastic labels, which kind of look a bit like those ones, which had a sort of a plastic sort of label on them. So that's why I called them paper labels. So that was the paper label era to the plastic label now. Now we're going back to paper, cotton paper.
I don't want this to appear like Walden Sattler from the Muppets.
I kind of do.
But to be fair, we do enjoy triggering one another.
It is
if
good.
I can say so, you're easy to trigger.
Trust me, you're far easier to wind up.
Hey, this is tasty. You had water?
No, I don't think I haven't.
I don't want to, but my role, as was always, to do this. On our local tasting panel, we had to taste with water, whether we felt it needed it or not.
If I'm to go back to our tasting that we hosted of the gathering, 35.239 in this pack. It was a 23-year-old whiskey. That's 52.9%. And we both tasted it and went, oh, that's magnificent. Don't think it needs any water. It's only 52.9%. 23 years of age, might fall apart with water. Actually, really worked with water, if I recall. We sort of went, oh, wow, look at that. It's like an old whiskey with water. I've said before, bourbon casks like this one actually often appreciate a drop of water. Sherry casks I tread carefully, and old whiskey almost never. But I always like to try it a little bit with water as well, like Andrew does.
I concur with your comments, by the way. That's exactly right. And you know what? I've added a little splash. Boy, it brings out the fruit.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to try. I've only got a tiny bit left in this glass, but just a small technical thing. If we can just bring that just a tiny bit closer. Just a tiny bit.
Just a little bit closer. There we go.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going.
Good. So, yeah, this is cool. I'm going to try it now with...
Shout out to Kate, by the way. It's a bit off-putting when you're doing this and you suddenly realise your wife's tuned in.
Owen Smythe, good to see you, Owen. Been a while. Hope you're having a good start to your year amid all the chaos. Anthony Cowie's watching. Good to see you. Zeno asks, will AD be coming back in April, the 20th live stream? I mean, that all depends. I haven't actually asked him yet. We're not planning that far ahead. I told you how many minutes we put into planning this one. That one is still next month.
I hope you're appreciating our incredible ability to ad lib here, because this is so off the cuff. It's ridiculous. Cody Banks asks, what is the ABV? It is 58.4%. Doesn't taste 58.4.
It doesn't. It tastes. It honestly tastes to me like low to mid 50s, like a good sort of 53, 54% kind of whiskey.
That is glorious. One thing I love about things like this is that you get a quick insight into, me personally, what I'm going to be putting an order in for when Outturn's released. I think I found my purchase for the month.
I actually legitimately think I'm going to get one of those as well.
I am.
That's fantastic.
I'm not talking up for the camera. I genuinely want a bottle of that. That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
That's to be fair, a distillery we don't see much of.
No, we don't see too many 55s. Some might remember some last 55 I think we saw was in the plastic label era.
Put that in context, this is 55.57. It's only the 57th cask. You compare
37 years.
Compare other distilleries where we're into the 300s now.
Yeah.
57's pretty low.
Very few of those kicking around. Oh,
I can see your glass is empty.
No, I'm still enjoying the nose of it.
Well, I about to say, do I need to
catch up? It's very easy drinking as well.
It's a quaffer.
Yeah.
It is a quality.
It's a very easy drinker.
This is something I really love. And we get it in about, I'm going to say 1 in every 5 society bottlings. 1 in every 5 society bottlings. You get this incredible paradox of a whiskey that is a beautiful quaffer. It's a quaffing dram. And yet, if you spend time and contemplate it, it can deliver so much if you really want to chase the rabbit down the hole. And I reckon you could spend time on this, analyze it. You could write a string of tasting notes that were going forever.
Yeah.
And it would keep giving as you explored it, or you can just go, you know what, this is great to sit down in front of a movie. I was going to say watch the footy, but we can't do that right now.
No, there's not much footy going on at the moment. No.
But yeah, lovely drop.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. When I talked the other night about assessing versus drinking.
Yes.
And is there often a time when you assess a whiskey and then you go to, like, afterwards you say to yourself, I definitely want to now drink that?
Definitely. For me, they're two different hats. And that's, sorry, that probably sounds weird, but that's just the nature of what I've had to do for 20 years. And I do wear a hat at times when I'm just purely in analytical mode and I'm assessing. And then the opposite one, we actually sit down and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Every now and then you actually enjoy what you assess as well. You can kill two birds with one stone. But yeah, absolutely. There's a distinction and a difference. And I do love it when you get a whiskey that is just so great. You know what? I've analysed it. I've written my tasting notes. I've worked out how best to utilise it and use it in terms of, is it something that will feature in an event? Would it be really good to pair with a certain food for a whiskey dinner we're going to do down the track?
Yeah.
Is it something that lends itself to being released at a certain time of year?
Yep.
We have some casks that just lend themselves to appear in winter and not in summer, and vice versa. But you can go through that process and you think, you know what, bugger this, I actually can't wait to the weekend and I'm going to just enjoy it.
Yeah, pour a biggie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that as I say, kind of goes with the territory of that cellar master role.
Indeed. Let's grab some of these questions, some of these comments. There are also several iterations of paper label. Alex, I'm going to just leave that comment there. We have to move past that one. Robert asks, any highlights from Dramfest AD? I'm going to get 3 questions in here. Graham says, everyone panic buy bottles from Distillery 55. Joel, this is actually the first time we've actually tasted this whiskey. You saw in the video earlier, Andrew unsealed that bottle. I actually hadn't tasted this whiskey before. I don't know if you had.
No, first time tonight.
And this is the first time it's been featured ever in Australia. This is the April Outturn release of this whiskey. There's a nice full photo and details of the whiskey in Outturn, which is coming out tomorrow, as I said. So Robert also asks, is the quaffable complexity a hallmark of the spicy and dry?
I don't think so. No. I think any flavour profile has the capabilities of filling that dual role.
The only problem with quaffable in old and dignified is that how much it hurts the wallet.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Robert also asked any highlights from Dramfest. Well, clearly catching up with you, mate.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Boom.
Once I bumped into Robert, the rest of the weekend just fell into his... I'm not being a smart ass.
No, it's true. It's true.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, I love catching up with Rob. Love you, Rob.
We had a strong contingent of Sydney members at Dramfest, and it was fantastic that Melbourne had a strong contingent, and we all bumped into one another and caught up. That was a beautiful thing, and I think that's one of the great things about our community and our scene and what we're in is the fact that we all tend to start to learn. We introduce ourselves to one another and we get to know one another through online forums and Facebook groups and all the rest of it. And occasionally our paths cross and we actually catch up in the flesh in real life. And it was great to go across to Christchurch and just have a whole stack of society members that were there from different states to catch up and say good day. It was a wonderful thing.
Quite possibly the last whiskey show of the year.
Right.
But this is no. But what was what I love as well about whiskey shows and fairs, especially interstate or especially anywhere or overseas, is that you often bump into other Aussies that you only know through Facebook or through Instagram or through wherever it is, online communities that we were talking about before, where you bump into someone, you go, I've never met this person before, but we sort of we've exchanged comments in the comment section, and it's like, oh, look at this. It's like, and you sort of feel like you already know that person, which is kind of lovely. It's not like a cold introduction or a cold shot elbow bump.
That's right.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a whiskey equivalent of Tinder out there somewhere.
Winder.
Hey, can I touch up on something? Mark Teagues asked a question here about 9.170. And I want to actually answer that question, but it brings another thing into play. Mark's asked the question here. 9.170 Australian Outback was just awarded double gold in San Fran. Will we see any released here? Great question. The honest answer is I don't know. I can't remember, and I'll explain why that is. Again, I'm going to wind the conversation back 20 minutes. How has the society changed? My role as cellar master 15 years ago was we were bringing in 3 to 4 shipments a year, and we were getting 7 or 8 casks per shipment. And generally we were getting a much larger allocation. So I might only be bringing in 8 different bottlings on a shipment, but I'd be getting quantities of 48, 60 bottles and all the rest of it. Something that's changed tremendously over the last 5 to 6 years in response to member requests and feedback is that we tend not to bring in such large quantities anymore, but we bring in a much broader, wider number of different casks. So instead of 8 casks now in a shipment, we're bringing in about 20 to 21 different casks. Now, of course, we're then only bringing in 12 or 18 bottles of them. But what that's enabled us to do is present and provide to Australian members a much larger range of what the society was bottling. That's a wonderful thing. One of the unfortunate byproducts of that is that I can't quite remember all the numbers the way I used to. When you only had to worry about 8 a shipment, 4 times a year, that was 32 casks, and I was on top of all of them. Now you've got to remember 21 times 4, occasionally 5. We brought in 5 shipments once. Trying to remember all 100 bottlings, what came in, where is it in the system, is it due for release soon, is it still out in the back shelves, is it on the water, is it in the warehouse in Scotland for us? I just can't remember those numbers like I used to. So, Mark, the honest answer is I can't remember, but I'll check that when I get home later tonight and get that message through to you to let you know what's going on.
I want to grab Nick Cusack asking, Andrew, what is your favourite flavour profile, if you have one?
Oh, I don't have one, mate, because I love peated whiskey. I love Old and Dignified. I love dried rich fruits. They're all good. I have a favourite style and a favourite distillery, as most people know, but favourite. I don't think if you picked out a favourite flavour profile and stuck to that, I think you'd be sounding a lot of whiskey.
Say that 3 times backwards.
Not a chance.
Okay.
3 times backwards, 3 times backwards, 3 times backwards.
Nice try. Shall we move on to dram number 2?
Let's dram it. Now, I did first one. Would you like to do the honours with this one?
Yeah, sure.
Pretty in pink.
Cocoa and coal. Yeah.
I'm just going to rinse my glass out here.
Yeah, good idea.
Great question, Nick. Mark has just made the comment here that the UK, US, and DE have released already. You've got to remember we're in a strange place here in Australia because anything that gets released in the UK or gets released in Europe comes out straight away. We have to wait 3 months for it to reach us on the water. And then once it gets in our warehouse, we might wait a month, 2 months, 3 months till we actually put it on an outturn. So it can be a very long lag between bottlings you see appear in Europe and what we feature here in Australia. Don't necessarily assume that because we didn't feature it at the same time that we're not going to feature it. There's just a much longer delay. And as I say, we're 3 months behind the 8 ball just because of time on the water.
Cocoa and Coal 93.120. Do love the 93s, Campbelltown whiskey.
Love 93s.
Let's have a listen, shall we? Oh, wow. That was quite a squeaker.
Yes. Also, Zeno asks, how was the masterclass, AD? I went to a few, mate. Can you send through another message just to clarify which one you're referring to there? Because there were some fantastic masterclasses. I have a feeling I might know which one you're referring to.
As soon as you said that.
Yes, no, as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, I think I know what's going on about there. Did you do the honours of the credentials?
No, not yet. Okay. I was saying it's Distillery 93 cask 120. So it's 120th cask we've bottled from Distillery 93. And it's one of 277 bottles, 57.3%, a 14-year-old recharred hogshead. So full maturation in a recharred hogshead. This is not an extra maturation or finish from a Campbelltown distillery. And what I find most fascinating about this, and I haven't even noticed it yet, what I find most fascinating about this is that it's a 93 in sweet, fruity, and mellow, which I'm really excited by because we see a fair few 93s, especially recently, which has been great. And we see some younger ones, like in that sort of 8 to 11-year-old bracket in the peated and lightly peated category. And we see a few 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds in the oily and coastal bracket. So seeing something like this in a sweet, fruity, and mellow is kind of exciting. It's a Campbelltown whiskey in the sweet, fruity, and mellow profile.
And guess what? It's sweet,
fruity, and mellow. It's such a versatile distillery as well. I find their range, both core range and their flavour, like across different expressions and different age statements, wildly different. And I find that always really exciting because we've had some 9 and 10-year-old peated casks that have been brash and brutish and like, coastal, like a rock in the face kind of thing. We've had some 14-year-olds and 15-year-old oil and coastal casks, which have been absolutely liquid sugar in the glass. And so, you'd think that maybe they'd be so close in some ways, but they're so far apart in others.
Can I make a bold statement? I reckon this distillery sings at 13, 14, 15 years old.
I completely agree.
We've had a lot of it, and we had a lot of, if you don't mind me saying, we had a lot of this distillery prior to you joining us in your role. We went through an unbelievable purple patch in about 2009, 10, 11, where we just had a string of them, and they were all stunning, but they were 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yep.
This distillery just seems to really hit its peak, at least based on the distillation regime they had back at that time.
Yeah.
Of course, they've now got new owners. Things have changed. It's now building a single malt profile, which it used not to have. So we may see a slight change in the house style 5 to 10 years from now.
I can rewind 5, 6 years. And do you remember those bottlings with the cows on them?
Yes.
There's some shocking whiskey being put into those bottles. The packaging was shocking and the whiskey inside them was equally so. But I think they have turned a corner as a distillery.
Absolutely. Massively.
Like massively turned a corner. And
it's amazing what a bit of an investment will do for you.
Yeah, exactly.
When the owners kick in some money. You've got to appreciate this distillery was the real unloved child. The owners really kept it going on a shoestring. It didn't operate 12 months a year. And it looked very tired and run down. Anyone who came to tastings that I did for the society, usually every time we featured this, I had a slide of the warehouse that just looked like it was some old Russian gulag from the 1970s. And it's had a massive facelift. They've invested into it externally, internally, in the brand, in the packaging. Everything's gone up, including the price. And it's changed and improved for the better. But I can't help but feel that with that, I dare say there's been a tweak to how they ferment and distill and also the quality of the wood that they're filling into. because they are now investing in this as a single malt brand. It used just to be stuff that went off for the Loch-Katrine blends by Sandy Bullock and his crowd. Now that they want to make a single malt profile, they obviously need to up their game, which they're seeing. Zeno's just made the point here that masterclass I was referring to, Society Cask 1. Yes, you are right, mate. It was a great masterclass. It was a lot of fun. It was very entertaining for those that were there. And the moral of the story is don't judge a cocktail competition right before you have to present a masterclass. That's the tip for you there.
Say no more. You know what? This is an April outturn preview along with the 55.57 we just had a dram of and spoke about. I'm going to go out and just say chocolate milkshake. I get like that malted.
Definitely the malt.
Yeah, like the milky,
almost Milo Ovaltine kind of malt.
Yeah, like real sort of like Ovaltine's a good one. Yeah, the tin is round, the mug is round, but they call it round tin. There's my terrible Seinfeld reference.
Dad joke number 3. Stay tuned for Dad joke 4 coming up shortly. I tell dad jokes. Sometimes he laughs at them.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. Other times I just groan.
Yeah. Oh, Johan, good to see you, mate. That was another great to catch up with Johan in Dramfest as well.
Yeah, good to see you, Joey. Thanks for tuning in.
Mr. Davis has tuned in. Good to see you, Andy.
And welcome back, Dave Phillips. Hope you and Joe are doing well. I'm sure you're in a bit of self-isolation at the moment. I hope you've got a few nice drams. I'm sure you do, tucked away.
Oh, Paul, look at bio. Good to see you, Paul.
Have you tasted that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really like that. That's
my kind. It doesn't sing Campbelltown to me.
No, it doesn't at all. Like, I reckon you could present that on a blind tasting.
Oh,
and you'd never pick that as a Campbelltown whiskey.
You could tell that there was a fruity number from Speyside and everyone would come along for the ride.
Probably one of the more, what do you call it? Like one of the more fermenty-faced Speysiders.
Like, fermenty space.
Like, you know what I mean? Like the
well, there's fruit. Absolutely.
Yeah, like, one of those really sort of like, like you could confuse that for a Loch Lomond or something.
There's fruit and esters, and it's more that Speyside style, which is in the orchard fruits, as opposed to what is a Speyside style these days. That's a debate for another day, which we're going to talk about in the grand tour of Speyside tasting event when we're allowed to have tastings again.
There you go. It'll be back. We'll be back.
Probably going to take that on the road, by the way. Massive interest for the Sydney tasting. It was meant to be on tomorrow night, in fact.
I've lost track of all days.
It was meant to be tomorrow night. Yeah. Sold out. I think we had 100 people at the Royal Automobile Club booked.
Yep, 100 booked in for Royal Auto.
And a lot of interest. I saw some comments on our social media streams about people wanting to know if we were going to bring that to other cities, and I think I will. Once we're allowed to hop on a plane again, I might fly to some other cities, and we'll bring a grand tour of Speyside to a town near you.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. And if you've got the dates right, which you do, I just realised we're in the last week of March. This Saturday would have been the Melbourne Whisky Cruise, single cask Whisky Cruise, which would have been a lot of fun. We had about 75 or so booked in for that, which was a real shame as well. But we'll be back and booming, of course, as soon as we're allowed to be.
Dr. Akers is in fine form tonight, presenting an Ardbeg 10 blind. Were you there the night I did that?
I think he just knows about it. Were you in Sydney that night?
I don't remember being in Sydney.
I don't remember being there, yeah. Although he's been to a few Sydney events.
Yeah.
Not just for those who missed the code at the beginning of this discussion, 93.120 is the code on that one. Cocoa and Coal. That's a really apt name for that.
It is.
That's a really apt name. It's cocoa, like Belgian chocolate waffles drizzled with honey, developed into hot chocolate and burnt milk before Herbie sausages and roasted chestnuts appeared.
Herbie sausages.
Herbie. I'm going to add a drop.
I can't hear the word Herbie without thinking of the Wonderbug. That's
you're showing your age.
Maybe my age. I'm sorry.
I mean, I know Wonderbug, but I'm not. I only know it because I watched it very, very briefly as a kid.
So did I.
Yeah. Must have had longevity to that. The do you get that, like the recharred hogsheads? Can you, for those who are unaware, can you explain what that means, a recharred hogshead?
Well, very simply, it's a big problem for the industry at the moment is the cost of wood and the cost of casks. And whereas once upon a time, the distilleries, particularly that were filling for the blenders, would happily use a cask 3, 4, 5, 6 times. They were happy for it to sit in vaguely inert wood for it to be lost in a blend. Now, with the focus on single malts and the fact that everyone's up their game, they've realised that by the time you're using a cask for a third time, it doesn't have much more to give. But it's very expensive to keep on buying new ones. And so by simply scraping off the inside of the barrel and re-charring it, you're getting a new lease of life on that cask. So you're using it for the third time, but it's actually being used for the second time. And some people even argue first, if you're re-charring, you're getting that new thing. It's very important to realise that charring the barrel plays a very important role in the maturation and development of the whiskey. When the spirit comes into contact with the carbon and the charcoal, a filtration process takes place. It aids in the removal of some volatiles and particularly some sulfur compounds that can be in the spirit, not the sulfur that we associate with sherry casks. So having a cask that's been freshly recharred and has that new, dare I say, virgin oak that's been exposed, hasn't been seasoned, and then charred it can really inject a lot of life and accelerate that maturation process compared to a cask that may have taken a while to get there otherwise. Well, it was described to me once by a guy at a distillery years ago. He said, you got to think of casks like tea bags. If you made yourself a cup of tea and you use that tea bag in and get the massive extraction, you could make yourself another cup of tea with the same tea bag, but you've got to let it sit for a lot longer to get it all out. And by the time you go back for a third one, you're going to get a pretty weak cup of tea. And casks operate in much the same way.
Light your tea bags on fire first. Give your tea bags a hot char.
Tasty stuff.
It didn't need water.
No?
I don't think it needed water, that one. For those who are playing at home. Let me grab some of these comments. Zeno says, it is a weird style from Scotia, like the last couple of bottles we saw in 2018-19. It's closer to, for those who are wondering, it's closer to sort of Asian coastal treats or Drambleton Lock than it is some of those 8, 9, and 10-year-olds that we had a few months ago. It's like zero peat. It has got, obviously, there's a bit of that sort of roasted chestnuts and there's just a hint of that Campbelltown in there. But as Andrew said, it's quite, you could mistake this on a blind tasting for a lovely Speyside whiskey as well.
Can I pick up on something? Othmar, mate, great to see you. Always love catching up with Othmar.
Yeah.
Don't get to do it often enough. Othmar's asked a fantastic thing. He's made a comment, rather. Distillery 93 seems to have an incredibly diverse range of possible styles. Do you agree? Yes. What do you put that down to? Hey, great question. And I think I've got a good answer.
Great question.
It's changed hands now, but until recently, this distillery was owned by the same people that owned Loch Lomond. And Loch Lomond Distillery is renowned for just being this Willy Wonka factory of unbelievable.
I love it. 5 different codes in our system. 5 codes for Loch Lomond.
So the Loch Lomond Distillery has 4 different still types that they operate and run in different ways. They make officially 11 different styles of whiskey that they all put out under different names. Loch Lomond is just one of them, but we know Inchmone and Inchmurrin and Crofton Gee and Inchfad.
Rosdu.
Old Rosdu, yeah, others. And so that same mob that owned that distillery that was responsible for a hugely diverse spectrum is the same mob that owned Glen Scotia. And you have to realise that was Loch Katrine distillers, and they made their own blends. And so as a blender, you need a vast range of different whiskies to draw upon to make your blends. And they were fairly independent and realised, well, we could spend a lot of money having to go to all the other companies and distilleries to get stock in, or we could just make a diverse range ourselves. So I think they utilised this distillery number 93. They made lots of different variants and campaigns to give them that diversity they needed for their blends. Their big blend, never start a sentence on live stream unless you know how it ends. What was there? They had there was a blend that was hugely selling. It was the number 2 selling blend in Germany of all places. What was their product? It was something like Highland Queen or something.
No, it wasn't Highland Queen. I know the one. It wasn't the Silver Seal, but the
I just can't bloody remember the name of it. In any event, they had a lot of success with their blends, and as I say, being able to make a diverse range of malts under their own roof is what drove that. So, Othmar, I hope that answers your question, mate. That's where the diversity comes from.
Dave Phillips says that 93 New Make is some of the best I've tasted in last April. I was there last May. Great distillery. And yes, the New Make is very tasty indeed. Reese says, less interested in listening. I've been to a couple of meetings in the mountains that resembled that. Yeah, we all have. We've all been to tastings where people are reluctant to listen in, and it's all about, it turns into a bit of a whiskey party, which is fine. It's a time and place for everything. And Julian says, haha, I made the big mistakes of leaving them on the kitchen bench. Cheers, AD, Matt. That's great stuff. Thanks, says Othmar. Thanks, Othmar. Always good to see you as well, mate. Hope everything's going well up in Queensland.
Indeed.
I think that just about leaves us where we wanted to finish up at. I'm going to leave it open just for a few minutes longer. If anyone has any Q&A, any questions that you want to throw at us, we're here now. We're here live on Facebook groups. So may as well jump in whilst we're both here, because you often get to ask Andrew questions. You often get to ask me questions. But to have us both in the same room, getting a rise out of each other is always good fun. And so we can always just have a bit of a chat instead of emails or tweets or whatever. So I'm going to just leave that open for a moment.
That's an interesting thing too. You mentioned tweets, Twitter. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the Society's Twitter handle, which I used to run, he does it more these days, was a very vibrant, active platform. A lot of members engaged with us through Twitter at the time. I was posting stuff very, very frequently, and we got a lot of engagement. And one thing I've noticed is that has very much morphed to Instagram now. Far less. I don't know if people have just dropped Twitter as a platform, whether people want to use more than 280 characters to say what they want to say. That's been a change.
Well, even I've seen the change from 140 to 280 characters even in the last few years. That only happened 3 years ago. So
yeah. But it doesn't change the fact that, my observation is just that less people are using it and less people are engaging corporate companies with it.
Yes.
Everyone will still jump on and say, hey, State Rail, my train was late, boo-hoo. But less people will sort of follow, I guess, the official announcement that, say, a mob like us, the Society, might put out. I used to put out something like, we've just announced the dates for the Sydney tasting, for example, the Melbourne tasting, and you'd get a string of inquiries. Don't seem to see that much anymore. So that's been a change.
That's been a change. I mean, the platforms, the mediums that we communicate on obviously always evolve and move. And I still love the fact that we've got I love our Facebook group, by the way, the one that we're broadcasting to right now, or unless you're watching this later on YouTube. I love the fact that we have this group that we're able to have these discussions on and grab some of the conversations.
There's a good one here from Joel. What's the best book to read or class to take so I can take over your jobs?
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think you need to learn a skill first, and that is to wait in line, because there's a long queue, let me tell you.
Yeah. The number of times I get that question, how do I get your job? Yeah. Here's one. Who paid for sponsored posts on Insta's Bailey Award? I don't know what you mean by that. I'm going to have to look that up. SMWS TikTok. Well, as I'm not a 13-year-old girl, probably not.
There's some funny stuff on TikTok.
I have it. I use it.
Now the truth comes out.
Look, I have it. I have the app. Don't get me wrong. I research all the apps and all the platforms. I just don't think that one's. I don't think you're not going to see a Society account on there anytime soon. But never say. Well, I'm not going to say that actually. And you know what? I'm not going to be beholden to that one. I second the SMWS TikTok. Michael Perolini, I hope you're well. I hope you're holding up in this very strange time that we're in at the moment, and I hope you're on some solid footing there. Question for AD: how do you prepare for a whiskey panel tasting?
Oh, that's a serious question. I feel like I've got to give a serious answer. The most important thing is to respect your palate and respect what you're there to do. Your job, if you're doing a panel, is to assess the whiskey, and that means giving it the time that it deserves and the respect it deserves. So very careful what I eat during that day. Obviously turn up sober as a start.
That helps.
I say that tongue-in-cheek. I've been to very serious judging panels and judging awards where judges have turned up 3 sheets to the wind, which I think is a disgrace. There's a very infamous case of that back in 2005. Someone who's no longer in the industry as a result. But how do I prepare? Respect what you've been tasked to do, and focus. Make the space, make the time. Most society panel work would take place at my house, so you'd separate yourself from the kids and all the rest of it. We would actually take care what we cooked in the kitchen that night, so that aromas from the kitchen didn't permeate our sense of smell and what we were tasting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're smelling whiskey and going, I get garlic on that, well, it's probably the kitchen out the back, not the whiskey. And as I say, taking care of your palate and making sure that you were appropriately prepared to give the dram every chance it needed of success. Because we used to be pretty brutal. Backtracking the conversation a bit, back when we used to only bring in, say, 8 bottles on a shipment, 8 casks, 8 different bottlings. One of the reasons we brought in 8 was because we rejected 12. Yeah, we used to have a very discerning panel, and remember, all this stuff had the society's label. It had been bottled by the society, so it had been approved by the UK tasting panel. We knew it was good whiskey, but we always felt that to pass the Australian panel, it had to be the cream of what was already the cream of the crop. And so we approached very, I suppose, a bit proud and arrogant about what we were trying to do and what we were trying to achieve. But if you had to whittle 20 really already good whiskies down to the best 8 that we were going to bring in, we had to make sure we got the right 8. Yeah, and that meant doing it in a very, very particular way and being focused and dedicated to it.
I mean, on your first point on that, I'll just jump in here and say that on the first point that Andrew said, I'm always really picky about what I eat, even sort of 12, 18, 24 hours before I'm assessing whiskey critically, whether it be for a panel or whether it be for an award show or whatnot. So it's kind of like I would definitely, like, one of my favorite breakfasts is like scrambled eggs with garlic, and I definitely won't have that on the day I'm having I'm doing any sort of a critical assessment of whiskies at all. So I'm very aware of and also just treading carefully with hot drinks, only because I always have this inner fear of burning my tongue.
Oh God, I've done that before too.
Yeah. And it's the worst thing ever. Just when you order a coffee an hour before you're about to go in to do some tasting, and you have a black coffee to reset your palate or something, and you have a sip and your tongue suddenly turned into sandpaper.
Zeno's asked a question, how do you calibrate your nose? Oh, easy. Very simple, mate. Glass of water, do that. Between drams, even as you're nosing a dram, and if you start to get a bit fatigued and you think, I'm not getting anything new out of this, quick little recalibrate, smell your glass of water, go back, does it every time.
It's true. Even though water doesn't have any smell, but it's the process of doing so.
Yeah. At the second half of that was if you've got a blocked nose or your palate is affected, you got to bail out. I was part of a tasting panel once for the society where I had a shocking cold, and I just sat and scribed, and I let the other guys do the tasting. I was useless. I could add nothing to it, so there was no point me even attempting.
Yeah, right.
So if your faculties, if your senses are affected by a cold or whatever, you've got to appreciate that you don't have much to contribute for that particular moment.
One of the most devastating tastings I ever had to host, which I loved hosting. I say that like I had to host it. No, like I got the opportunity to host. Was an Islay whiskey class in Islay for all sorts of travellers who had travelled there for Facial last year, and I couldn't smell or taste a single thing. Everything was blocked up, and we're opening all these rare Islay Society casks, and I have no idea what any of them tasted like. What a shame. Joel, I'm going to get back to your question in a second. But
I like Joel's question.
Joel's very good. Okay, jump in on Joel's. No. I
just want to make sure we don't have a look.
We want to look Joel's. Joel's has a great question. Liam, has the flavour profiles Aussie like drinking evolved a lot? My answer to that, and I'm going to let Andrew get on this as well, is that I honestly think that the Australian palate for whiskey, for better or for worse, follows a lot of where the wine industry has been and is currently. And I think we see a lot of that, especially in beer as well, a little bit in beer, but it's not just isolated to whiskey. And I don't count white spirits in that, but I'd say that if you see how most Australians like to enjoy their wine, we're not a big country we're not a big appreciators of white wines, of as heavy as it gets is maybe a few Chardonnays, but it's like a sort of we're not huge on sort of the lighter varietals of wine, especially in reds and whites. Pinots are okay, sure, but everyone loves their big ballsy Shiraz, their big ballsy Cab Sav, and the bigger is better approach. And I see the same a lot with Australian drinking palates over whiskey palates over the last few years. People love, like I say, sweet and peat. People love big peated whiskies that have heaps of sherry. It's like bam, 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 rock and roll. But I think we more and more, I think as the society's efforts go, as other efforts go as well, it's trying to actually train palates to start thinking about it in a different way, like the difference between a symphonic whiskey, like a whiskey that is a bit like a Schubert in the glass rather than a Metallica. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's like, some whiskeys as you taste, like I'd say that 55.57 is an example of like a Schubert whiskey. It's like it's a lightness to it. It's even though it's cask strength, ignore the proof for a moment. It's got a light sort of lovely sort of savory note to it. It doesn't have to be peat and sweet. Whereas
it's more Mozart, really.
It's more Mozart. Sorry,
I don't get Schubert on that.
Oh, okay. It's not quite. It's a little bit more.
Brahms at a stretch.
Yeah, maybe a bit of Schumann. Look, whereas so that's, I think, but over time it's changed, and I think we're sort of developing that a bit, and I think there's overall Australian drinking palates have changed for the better, but at the same time I do worry that it sometimes is a little bit too much, like, as I say, a bit too Metallica, and it's a bit where we ignore some of the symphonic greats as a result. Let's go back to Joel's question, however. Sorry, there's a lot of comments coming in, as always.
Some great ones.
Toro Suzuki-san, good to see you. Hope you're well. Sorry, yes, Joel. Can you get to be a part of the tasting panel or something similar just by volunteering your time and showing a general knowledge of whiskey, or do you really need some form of recognition within the industry?
Well, a great question, Joel. First of all, how do you actually get recognition in the industry? You could have the best nose and the best palate in the business, but if no one knows about it, you're going to be sitting at home impressing yourself and no one else. You got to speak up. If you think you have a talent in that area, if you think you've got a good nose and a good palate, and that's only half of the mix, by the way. The other half is actually having a brain that can translate those into words.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So many people get a whiskey and go, oh, I recognize, what is it? Oh, I get and they can't think of the word.
Yeah.
So there's a dual skill. It's having the nose and the palate to identify them, and then the brain and the vocabulary to translate those into words that
this is one word you can't get wrong, isn't it?
That's right.
My vocabulary isn't very good.
So yes, but can I give you my story? I went to the very, very first society tasting in 2002 as a rank and file member. I was just a whiskey enthusiast at the time. I had no involvement, and every tasting I made a bit more noise, and I helped out the guy at the front, and I answered. People would ask questions that the host at the time didn't know how to answer. I knew the answers. I spoke up a bit, and before long, someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you should have some involvement in this," and it went from there. So. I would encourage you that if you feel you've got something to add and you have skills in that area, you got to make yourself known to people who can give you that leg up. No one just woke up in the industry.
No.
You get in there through some means, and it might be who you know, not what you know, but one way or the other, don't keep a brilliant palate locked up as your own little secret.
Yeah, very good point. There's nothing more I could add to that. I'm going to go some of these other comments in here. Nicholas Husek asks, do your nostrils smell differently? I had a tasting last week who said, I'm assuming a taster last week who said each nostril smells different things.
Oh, now there's the dominant nostril.
I
used to talk about this in tastings all the time. At any point in time, one nostril will be more effective and capable of smelling aromas than your other one. So you always have a dominant nostril. I've never heard anyone say that one side detects some things differently to the other. And there's another really weird thing that goes on where your dominant nostril changes several times during the day, which Dr. Akers actually gave me the reason for that at a tasting in Adelaide I hosted that he was at a few years ago. I made this smart-ass comment going, hey, your dominant nostril changes, and there was a doctor who told me why. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go. But I've not heard that before, Nick, about at the end of the day, it goes up your nostrils, it goes over your olfactory nerve endings. It's not like the nerve ending on the left is different than the one on the right.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Joel Bradbury says the whites are more appreciated here in Tas, I think. Yeah, but it's a very small market in Tas, so it doesn't unfortunately cover everything. But you are right. I think Tasmania makes some great lighter varietals. That's true. That's very much climate based as well.
I like James' comment here. I'm staggered by some of the top whiskey commentators who smoke like chimneys. Mate, me too. I cannot believe it. You look at some of the people out there writing their notes, and we know what smoking does to your palate.
Yeah.
I can't figure that one out, frankly.
I unlike Andrew, I do occasionally enjoy a cigar. I don't smoke cigarettes, but I occasionally enjoy a cigar. And when I say occasionally, I maybe get like through 3 a year best. It's normally 0 to 1. But I love it. I love a nice cigar. However, I'm also very aware that when I'm smoking a cigar, during and for 6 to 8 to 10 hours afterwards, I can't taste anything. It's like if I'm having a whiskey and a cigar together, I don't. I normally have a rum and a cigar because the rum's got a nice sweetness to it, but it's nothing interesting. I wouldn't choose any sort of super fancy rum. I won't be pulling out any Coronis or anything just to have with a cigar. But I'll be certainly enjoying something sweeter on the sweeter side of a whiskey, or a sweet rum, a dark rum to enjoy with it, just because it balances out. But I'm not a huge fan of like pairing cigars and whiskeys. I don't think that really works. I think you often find they sort of one either always overpowers the other, and it's almost always a cigar overpowers the whiskey.
I've never encountered a whiskey that overshadowed its cigar counterpart. It was always over.
Yeah, I mean, I have only once, and that was sort of like it was a really heavily peated whiskey, and it was a really light cigar.
Right. Okay.
And so it was like, but it was sort of like it's always a fight between the two rather than a meeting in the middle of flavors. And for me, I don't really care for that.
Yeah. Well, look, I shouldn't comment. I'm a militant non-smoker, so
you are. Yeah. And when I say I smoke cigars, I mean I honestly mean I have like one a year, but it's only because I enjoy the flavor, but I don't find the opportunity to smoke them. What am I going to do? Stand out the back and have a smoke anyway? Spot on, Matt. Give it time. We have a mission to educate. Yes, we do. Smells like Mozart. Yes. What else? Jerry asks, any tips on developing palate training besides L'Ainesse du Whisky?
I'm not sure what that second reference is there, but there's the guy on the street who asked the musician how to get to Carnegie Hall, and he said, practice, 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 practice.
That's as good as answer as, that's I couldn't say it better. Sounds like something I'd say, yes. Now, Joel says, when normally I taste whiskey, I get that thing, that tastes like that thing, like I really remember.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. And we both know people like that who have great palates, and they take a while to sort of articulate what they smell in a whiskey or what they taste in a whiskey. And it's not just so vocabulary, it's also referencing flavors and foods and spices.
I tell you, there is a genuine thing you can do. I assume you can still, but I actually used to import it. I was the Australian importer. I cut ties with them a long time ago, but there used to be that spirits nosing kit.
Yeah, the aroma training kit.
The aroma training kit. And you could get it in a 12-pack or 24-pack where there were 12 different aromas or 24s. And you could train yourself to identify and recognize aromas through that. So that's actually something you can physically go out and buy to improve your ability to detect aromas and describe them. So there are tools out there to help you.
Yeah. Andy says, me too, very partial to a Monte Cristo number 2 and a Kalila Distillers edition. You'd need that Kalila to cut through that. And Dave Phillips says twice a year, yes. I like your comment, Martin. I can taste plenty after a cigar, plenty of cigar. So look, that's really where we'll leave it for tonight. If that's okay.
Yeah.
And I really want to thank Andrew again for taking the time to come around, have a chat. I hope you've all enjoyed talking to us both, having a chat with us tonight, tasting 2 whiskies from Outturn. It'll be landing in your inboxes from tomorrow, and of course, Outturn lands on Friday the 3rd. It says on the back here, which is very apt, and this wasn't actually intended, but when we were designing this and going to print, but it says we are always open, and it's true. Our warehouse and our website and Australia Post and everything are still open at the moment. Essential services like Australia Post have been told to keep going, and we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep broadcasting and keep teaching about whiskey and having a bit of fun with it along the way.
Because that is an essential service.
That is an essential service. It is an essential service. And I want to thank you all for tuning in, asking amazing questions and engaging with us, because it's always great to do this. If you've been watching on Facebook, thanks for the questions. If you're watching on YouTube, put something in the comments, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell icon as well. It really helps. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.